Back at it again. Oh, okay. Oh, what's up, Greg? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another installment of Battle of the Shorts. It is week 6. Can you believe it? We've already managed to get through 6 weeks of this insane project that I am doing. I didn't realize how taxing that the reading and editing would be on a weekly basis with everything else going on in my life. But here we are. Let me get you a an update on the scoreboard here. We have gone over 5 weeks worth of stories. That means 20 authors so far have been covered. I think 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 20. What the heck? I'm good at math. Some great authors have been covered so far: Jack Vance, Ursula K. Le Guin, Robert Silverberg, among a bunch of others. Tanith Lee. This week we're looking at James Blish taking on Dune author Frank Herbert. A pretty big matchup there. And then next we have Zenna Henderson, a more underrated female writer, going up against her contemporary Anne McCaffrey. Let's see how we get along with these matchups. But before I go any further, I want to make sure and shout out our sponsor this week. It's not actually a sponsor. This week's brought to you by Rob over at SpaceArchives. Rob, if you're watching, shout out. You're doing a great job. Go over and give Rob a subscribe. He does great work over there on the channel. That brings us to matchup number 1, where I read two pretty famous authors in this science fiction space. James Blish's The Box in Beyond Control, this edition of Beyond Control, and a short story called Seed Stock in the book of Frank Herbert. Let's talk about The Box. So I've read 2 novels by James Blish so far, one of them being A Case of Conscience and one of them being Vor. Now, I had trouble with both of these. I didn't dislike them, but I didn't really enjoy them as much as I was hoping. I think Blish has had a lot of time in the spotlight in this corner of BookTube, and so therefore my expectations were high. When I started with Vor, I was let down because it was a fairly predictable plot. And then A Case of Conscience really felt like 2 halves of the story that felt very disjointed. Both were good in their own right. Both did not, in a cohesive way, mesh up to create a really good novel, in my opinion. I know I'm probably in the minority there. It did not land with me. This is my 3rd attempt at James Blish. And let me tell you, 3 strikes and you're out in my book, and James Blish might be out. The Box is a kind of classic pulp story that like I said, I read in Beyond Control here. And we follow a man named Meister. He is formerly of a concentration camp, and he lives in what we think is probably New York City. And he wakes up one morning to basically a dome of shadow of cloud being just surrounding the city. Creates a panic, as you might expect, and he's the only residence engineer in the box, wouldn't you know it? And so we have again kind of this predictable plot, in my opinion, where uh, Blish kind of does this thing that Robert Heinlein did in the Heinlein novel I read, The Day After Tomorrow, where from the beginning, once the stakes are set, you can kind of see where it's going to go. And given that the time period that this was written in, 1949 was when this was published. A lot of these stories, well, this is kind of a mixed bag actually. 50s, 40s, 60s. There was 3 different decades represented in this, and the story kind of made me roll my eyes. The quippy dialogue was annoying to me at times. The fact that he was the only engineer that could take care of the problem of said box really bothered me. It was just plot convenience. Blish's writing doesn't really bother me, but it doesn't grab me like a lot of other authors of this era that I've really enjoyed. And so once again, I kind of went in with expectations, knowing that this is one of his most well-known short stories, and I was just let down, unfortunately. I don't want to get too much into the plot, but like I said, you have this giant dome-like structure. The city is scrambling to figure out what it is and who's doing it, who's created it, and we find out that they've been working on basically like a shield against bombs, the nuclear bomb, and they haven't arrived at the creation of it, but someone else beat them to it, and so someone else is using it against them. And like I said, I think a lot of this hinges on the fact that there is a ton of dialogue, and it's smarmy and playful. At one point, somebody literally says, I'm trying to think, mumbo jumbo, exclamation point, in response to something like totally serious. One of the like military professionals says mumbo jumbo, and I was like completely taken out of the story. I understand it was written 77 years ago. Some stories are dated, and this one to me was very dated. Just felt very pulpy in a way that I just could not get past it. This, unfortunately, is probably the worst story I've read so far as gradings go. I'm giving The Box by James Blish a 4 out of 10. It wasn't completely, utterly pointless, but it was not very fun. It was not very memorable. And as I said at the beginning of this kind of discussion about Blish, he's struck out 3 times now with A Case of Conscience, Vor, and now the Box. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to try him again, but I'm really using this short story challenge, the Battle of the Shorts, as a way of trying to find new authors that I haven't read before and to see if I like or dislike their stuff. And with Blish, I've given him several tries and he just has not impressed me so far. So if you are a Blish believer, please in the comments below, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me what other stories I should read. I understand there's other stuff out there that he's written that I have not read that might be a lot better. Maybe I've just chosen the wrong stories for my taste. Next, we have Frank Herbert, the great author of Dune, very well known, and everybody kind of at this point I feel like has either read or watched Dune now that a couple of movies are out. But Seed Stock is the first short story in this collection. This is a May 1981 Berkeley edition of the book of Frank Herbert with Frank's face right there. A very odd but fitting cover because it goes along with that Dune livery of the 80s in the Berkeley style. Seed Stock was in classic Herbert fashion, a story that revolved kind of around environmentalism and not necessarily desert space, but just a planet and its environment and how humans interact with that environment. We follow a man named Crowder. I'm going to call him Crowder. I like Crowder better. Crowder is a fisherman. He's kind of the head of this group of fishermen that is fishing for something called trotty, which is a shrimp-like substance on this planet that they are on. The planet is unnamed, and it is formerly an expedition of Earth, an expansion colony of Earth that has kind of failed. All of the plans have gone awry, and we have just kind of a small colony of humans who are just trying to make it by. They haven't admitted defeat yet, but their things are dire, and the food is running out, and their plans are just not coming to fruition. Crowder has a wife who is a much smarter scientist than him, and they have twins. This society seems to have a kind of hierarchy of sorts where it's smart people at the top, scientists, environmentalists, biologists, people who run everything on this colony, and then all of the workers. Crowder is among the workers, and a lot of the upper echelon don't like that his wife Honida, has chosen him. Many of the other scientists and people among her kind of upper echelon class do not like this. And so Crowder is fishing, and he brings the fish back, and they're getting the fish done. He goes back. All he wants to do is see his wife and his children. He goes back to their kind of hut. He talks to his wife, and his wife, as I said, is this scientist who a lot of them are tasked with trying to kind of find solutions to the food problem. His wife has mysteriously found a way to produce food, but it comes at a cost. And Crowder kind of reckons this whole story internally with the pathways that his children will have to take in order to survive on this planet, because the expansion colony doesn't have a way of contacting Earth or getting back. Their ship is done. and there's not technology to repair it. So they're here, and this is where their future lies. And the story really beautifully details kind of this struggle and then admission to what the circumstances are allowing this colony to do, through the eyes of this really hardworking blue collar man who doesn't really speak a lot, and the love of his wife, who is much more intelligent than him, but they both have this kind of beautiful, like, yin and yang together. It has a hopeful ending to it where I think Herbert just did a really good job of making me feel a lot, for these characters in a short period of time. This story was less than 20 pages. It really didn't have a whole lot of like rising action or conflict other than the circumstances that the colony is presented with before we ever even enter the story. And so, Herbert's language here is beautiful as such. In Dune, he describes the landscape beautifully. He describes, like, the fishing and the environment and the, just the visceral feeling of the sand and of the huts and of the sun and things like that very well. I didn't think it was a knockout, but I really did enjoy this one, and I'm really glad that I read it. It's the only other thing I've read besides the first Dune by Herbert. And Herbert is going to take home a solid 7 out of 10 for seed stock, beating out the not so great The Box by James Blish. So we have our first victory of week 6. Frank Herbert taking home the gold medal. Not actually, shouldn't say that. There's a gold medal, silver medal, and bronze medal at the end of this. Frank Herbert beats out James Blish. That's all. He doesn't take home a gold medal yet. And now, with Frank's name added to the list of winning authors, let's go to our second matchup of week 6. Our second matchup of week 6 features two very prominent female writers of the 50s and 60s. We have Zenna Henderson writing The Anything Box, not to be confused with James Blish's The Box, in the year's greatest science fiction and fantasy. I think it's the second annual volume. Okay, I thought this was the inaugural edition, but edited by Judith Merrill. Judith Merrill, by the way, has a ton of great material in some of her anthologies that she put together. It's got, I don't know if you can hear that, it's got a lot of flop to it, and there's great names in this one, including Zenna Henderson. And then the other story that we have was Weyr Search, or Weyr Search. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it, but I pronounced it Weyr. Weyr Search by Anne McCaffrey, which won, as you can see here, a Hugo, the Hugo Winners Volume 2. This is a more modern Fawcett Crest edition. But I believe that Anne McCaffrey was the first female to win a Hugo Award with this novelette or novella. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, preceded the Dragon Riders of Pern series, but is kind of the foundation for it. So let's go through these stories one by one. So we have The Anything Box by Zenna Henderson in SF The Year's Greatest, second annual volume. And it is the most Bradbury story I've ever read, not written by Bradbury. And what I mean by that is the softness and elegance of the prose is utterly breathtaking. I did not realize that Zenna Henderson had this kind of magical softness, like I just said, to her writing that just is so compelling. It's so simple. I think that's what also makes Bradbury and this kind of writing by Henderson so effective, is that it doesn't relish in itself too much, but it gets right up to the edge where the prose and the poetry just, it's like honey right off the tongue. It's just beautiful, but it doesn't overindulge. It does just enough. We follow a little girl named Sue Lin. She's in elementary school, and we follow her teacher. Those are kind of the main two characters that we have in this story. And Sue Lin believes that she has a anything box, where she sits here with her hands holding this box and staring into it at her desk. She kind of only does this, and the other students start to realize that she's doing this. And the teacher, being a good teacher, comes to her aid and kind of playfully goes along with this imaginative thing that she's come up with. And I should note, this short story held a really like deep meaning for me because both my parents were teachers. My mom was an elementary school teacher, and I just saw my mom in this teacher character that we read from the perspective of, and that I think kind of gave it a lot more weight for me personally. I don't want to let that necessarily cloud my judgment of this story, but I think that that's why we read. You know, that's one of the things that we read for, is to connect with things on such a personal, deep level where we can see our loved ones and people that we know in other characters, and we connect with them through the story even more so. So that, as kind of an aside, I really did connect with like the main character. I could see my mom interacting with a student like the teacher does in this story. And so the little girl, Sue Lin, we find out has kind of some issues going on at home. Her dad is in prison. Her mom, with other kids, is just kind of trying to make ends meet. And this is how Sue Lin kind of sort of gets along. The teacher is kind of grappling with this situation by, I think, learning her own lesson in finding that it's much better to indulge in a child's fantasy like this, especially if they're struggling. Um, when it comes to the aid of their imagination, you have to play into their imagination as an adult, especially a teacher who might be the only person that cares for that child. And as somebody with a young child, it really did again connect with me deeply to see this little girl who's kind of just using this anything box that she stares into to go into another world. And that's truly what the anything box does. This story is set in, kind of the typical American classroom of the 1950s, and so you're not seeing a fantastic landscape like you did in Frank Herbert's Seedstock. You're not seeing this worldwide calamity like The Box by James Blish. You're simply seeing a teacher and a student interacting, and it has this beautiful push and pull until we reach the end where the teacher kind of really engages with the anything box and realizes that it's real and the magic of the anything box is real. And just like classic Bradbury, it has enough whimsy and childlike wonder where you're left puzzled, kind of like, was it real or were they using their imagination, both child and teacher? Or does that matter? You know? And so I just thought it was wonderful. It matched Connie Willis in terms of the impact that it had on me. Didn't quite reach up to the Le Guin that we read last week that got a 10 out of 10. But Zenna Henderson gets a 9 out of 10 from me for the anything box. It was truly an amazing story, and I really think you should seek it out. I wanted to read one quick passage from the anything box. This is when the teacher experiences the anything box for the first time. I was running barefoot through the whispering grass. The swirl of my skirts caught the daisies as I rounded the gnarled apple tree at the corner. The warm wind lay along each of my cheeks and chuckled in my ears. My heart outstripped my flying feet and melted with a rush of delight into a warmness as his arms. And then it cuts off as she takes her hands off the anything box. Just a little teaser to show you that Zenna Henderson, if you're looking for any kind of Ray Bradbury-esque writing, Zenna Henderson will serve you well. Zenna Henderson gets a 9 out of 10 from me. Oh, it's a great story. And now we move on to our final story, Weyr Search by Anne McCaffrey, the longest short story, or should I say novella, that we have gone through so far on Battle of the Shorts. And I thought it would be fitting, it features dragons, to have CJ Charizard return. I also I didn't even tell you Greg was here. How rude of me. Greg, you've been here the whole time, and I'm going to overshadow you with CJ Charizard just for a few minutes because we have a dragon story. All right, let's talk about Weyr Search. I just got finished with it about an hour ago. It should be fresh in my mind for me to talk about it. But as I said, it won a Hugo, 1968. It was the first woman, Anne McCaffrey was the first woman to win a Hugo Award with this story. It felt long, and not in a bad way, but it felt like an excerpt from a full-length novel or a novel squished down into novella length. And that makes sense given that it kind of predated Dragon Riders of Pern, which would become a series, and I think has a lot. It's set on Pern, a planet in the distant future where dragons and riders kind of interact. But it sets you into this world so immediately and so intensely that you don't really have time to catch up. You just kind of have to go with it. Kind of confused for the first 10, 20 pages about the politics of this world and what's going on and why these people are doing this and yada yada. But we follow kind of two main points of view through this story. One being Flar and Lessa. Lessa being this young woman who is in a hold. She's a part of Hold Ratha, which is kind of her family's former hold that on this planet of Pern that used to kind of have power and have connections to the Dragon Riders. But this man, this kind of disgusting, crazy lunatic named Fax came in and he killed all of her family. But she survived and she kind of under the radar hid and just became like a working woman and bided her time until she could get her revenge. Flar and his brother Vernor, his half brother Vernor, come in as dragon riders, and they are on a Weyr search for a werewoman. There seems to be need for female dragon riders, and when they go on a search, each hold that they go to is just supposed to give them hospitality as they try to find the werewoman. And so I'm not going to explain the whole plot, but that's kind of the setup for it. And as you can see, we kind of have our bad guy in Fax. We have the kind of triangle that's going on where Lessa doesn't really know who she is yet, but the dragon riders that have arrived are going to make that known, and chaos ensues. I thought that the story was fun. It had fun, exciting action. It was intriguing. There was a couple of really intense scenes, one of which over dinner was very good, as Fax kind of is sort of poking at the Dragon Riders. The Dragon Riders are poking back at him, and there's this kind of, are they going to fight? Are they going to fight? Kind of like energy about this. And yeah, I enjoyed my reading experience. I think that it like I said, it bothered me a little bit that it felt like I should have been reading a novel and that the story was just kind of squished. It gave me some kind of tones of George R.R. Martin. Felt a little bit like Game of Thrones, and kind of those first couple novels in A Song of Ice and Fire, mixed with this kind of YA kind of long lost memory of when I used to read the Aragon books. I believe that's called The Inheritance Cycle now, by Christopher Paolini. Those were some of the first novels that I ever read that were like larger novels after Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, that kind of thing. So it was very foundational for me, and it felt very derivative of this. This obviously predated that by a long time. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great. I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was just like Frank Herbert's Seed Stock in terms of the impact that it left on me. I enjoyed it. And I have a lot of respect for Anne McCaffrey after this. I enjoyed her work. I don't exactly know why this got a Hugo. It didn't have the deeper themes that I think I was hoping for from something that won an award like that. But it was overall, it was an enjoyable novella, and I'm glad I read it. I gave this one a 7 out of 10, just like Frank Herbert. So with that, Zenna Henderson got a 9 out of 10, which beats Anne McCaffrey's Weyr Search. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. So Zenna Henderson wins the week with a 9 out of 10. CJ Charizard, do you have any kind of closing thoughts as we wrap up this week of Battle of the Shorts? All right. Oh, I almost hit the camera. Greg, you got anything to say? You have just gone radio silent, my friend. All right. Well, let's close out week 6 and give Zenna Henderson the win. But with that, we finish up this week with Frank Herbert taking out James Blish and Zenna Henderson beating out Anne McCaffrey. Overall, we had 3 out of 4 short stories go very well. So I'd say we're on a heater still, folks. We've done a great job so far of compiling really good short stories for you guys to go seek out and find, hopefully read. Tons of stuff in the backlog already with this series. and I'm hoping you're enjoying it. Like I said, go give Rob over at SpaceArchives a follow, subscribe, watch his videos. He's doing great stuff. That's been Greg Bear. I've been your host, Dad Like Book. We will see you next week for week 7 of Battle of the Shorts. 9 a.m. sharp, Saturday morning. Catch you later.